Our sixth story comes from Daku Walmbara, a Kuku Yalanji man who faced a horror in the Cape York Peninsula of Queensland in the dry season of 2022. I'm a rainforest soul. Tracking cassowaries and weaving baskets in Kuku Yalanji country is my life's rhythm. At 31, I was a carpenter in Cooktown, fed up with sawdust and city blokes who thought the bush was just a postcard. Too many tourists taking selfies in sacred places, too many outsiders talking over old stories like they were trivia. So I packed my dilly bag, a machete and a fire kit, and went bush, to clear my head and find an ancient rock art site my elders whispered about, tucked away in the old bones of the land, deep in the scrub where even birds second-guess flying. Cape York's not the kind of place you stroll through. It's a wild sprawl of eucalyptus woodlands, sandstone ridges, rocky outcrops, and secretive creeks that burble with old language. Everything out there listens, and everything's got a memory. The land's not dead, it watches. My father used to tell me about the Quinkan, trickster spirits from the dreaming. The small, twitchy imjim who messed with your stuff and made you lose your way, and the tall, skeletal Timara, the enforcers of law and trespass, who didn't speak, they hunted. I thought it was just a yarn to keep kids close to camp. Turns out, the stones grin wider than I do. I hiked in at first light. The air was sharp with crushed gum leaves and dry earth. Wallabies thumped through the brush like they had business to get to, and honey-eaters chirped above like they were warning me off. The sun hit the escarpments just right, turning the sandstone into melted gold. I felt alive. More than that, I felt seen, like the land had turned its head and was giving me a proper look over. I found the art site around midday, a jagged outcrop with overhangs, weathered but pulsing with old presence. The Quinkan paintings were everywhere, stick-like figures twisted into strange shapes, some child-sized, some stretched too tall, all with wide, staring eyes. I made camp nearby in a small clearing, taking care not to disturb the rocks or the termite mounds, their homes, just like ours. I lit a small fire, and its smoke curled slow and lazy, like a friend settling beside me. The damper I baked had a good crust, and I chewed it slowly, smiling to myself. "Daku, you're a bush king," I said aloud, the scrub nodding along in its usual silence. But later that night, the bush turned. The silence wasn't friendly anymore. It was holding its breath. I woke to a giggle, not a bird's call or a possum fight, something high-pitched, nasty, playful in a way that felt wrong, like a kid who'd just nicked your wallet and was about to tell their big brother. It echoed off the rocks, bouncing too many times. The air had gone still and damp, smelling of moss and rust. My stomach dropped. I reached for my machete, the metal cold in my hand. "Just the wind, mate," I muttered, but even the stars looked dimmer, like they were ducking behind clouds that weren't there. Then came the growl, deep, wet, like something big had crawled out of a cave and hadn't had breakfast yet. I spun my torch around, nothing, just trees swaying, but my skin prickled. That growl wasn't made by any dingo. I told myself not to panic, but that was a lie. My knees were jittering. "Okay, Daku, don't be a bloody mug," I whispered. But it was already too late for that. I'd walked too close to the paintings without a greeting, without smoke, without asking. A carpenter's arrogance. The stories were clear. Quinkan law isn't written in books. It's carved in cliffs, whispered in wind. And if you ignore it, it doesn't forgive. Suddenly, the rocks weren't just rocks. They had faces. Carved by time or spirit, I couldn't tell. but they grinned with wide, cracked mouths, their stone eyes glinting like wet quartz in the torchlight. Something hissed my name. Daku. Not yelled, not growled, just whispered, but sharp. So sharp, it felt like it sliced across my ribs. My heart nearly dropped into my boots.
"Real personal, eh, rock clowns?" I muttered, trying to sound brave, but my throat was dry as dust. Then something scuttled, fast, behind a boulder. I caught a glimpse, a squat shape, small arms, long fingers, the Imjim. It giggled again, like it was loving the show. But behind it, a tall shadow stretched across the escarpment. Thin limbs, a twisted torso, its head cocked at a wrong angle, and eyes like dull red coals. The Timara. That one didn't laugh. That one watched. The rock faces grinned wider, as if they'd found their entertainment for the night. I remembered Father's words. If you don't bring fire with respect, they'll bring fear without mercy. I lunged for my fire kit, my hands fumbling. I grabbed eucalyptus leaves, dry bark, and sparked it fast. Smoke rose, curling slow, and I whispered a Yalanji greeting, voice trembling. Nangana Yirmbun, peace to this place. The giggling faltered. The Timara's eyes flared, claws scraping stone, but it didn't strike, not yet. Then it lunged. Claws swiped through where I'd stood. I dove behind a tree, bark splintering as the spirit raked it. "Missed me stretch," I croaked, fanning the smoke desperately. The Imjim darted forward, snatching my dilly bag and tipping it over like a cheeky kid, scattering damper and string. I kicked at it. It vanished with a cackle. My torch flickered. The shadows stretched unnaturally, like they weren't waiting for sunrise. I spotted a slab of granite nearby, carved with old Kuku Yalonji markings. Eyes, hands, and what I now realized were warning lines. Not art, instructions. I scrambled to it, smoke trailing behind like a tail. I pressed my hand, blackened by smoke, against the carvings and sang. My voice was hoarse, but I pushed it out, calling to the ancestors, to the land, to anything listening besides the Quinkan. The carvings vibrated beneath my palm. The Timara stepped closer, its claws twitching. It didn't like the smoke, but it didn't fear it either. It was waiting for me to stop, for the fire to die, for my spirit to break. The carvings glowed faintly, and the air shimmered like heat haze. The Timara flinched. I fanned the fire harder, the smoke curling like fingers around me. The Imjim tried again, this time tugging at my foot. I kicked, screamed, and shoved more leaves into the flames. The scrub around me bent like it was breathing. The Quinkan faces on the rocks stilled, no longer laughing, but their presence lingered, just out of reach, testing my resolve. I stayed like that all night, arms aching, voice breaking, machete in one hand and smoke in the other. The Timara circled, but didn't strike again. The Imjim giggled sometimes from the dark, but I ignored it. I kept my hand on the slab, chanting, praying, pouring every ounce of will into the fire. When the first pink line of dawn cracked through the trees, the shadows peeled back like skin. The figures faded. The grins on the rocks cracked and flaked. The scrub exhaled. And I collapsed. The fire had gone out. My hands were blistered, my eyes burned, and my legs barely worked. But I was alive. I hiked out, slow and shaken, the chant still playing in my head like a stuck didgeridoo note. My camp was trashed, trees clawed, gear scattered, and my machete black with ash. Back in Cooktown, I didn't tell many people, not at first, but I couldn't ignore the weight of it. Now I teach Kuku-Yalanji kids, not just about stories, but about law, about respecting the spirits in the stones. I show them how to greet with smoke, how to listen when the scrub falls quiet, and what happens when you don't. The Quinkan still visit my dreams sometimes. Their grins are softer now, but they haven't gone. Not really. I don't trek Cape York's scrub alone anymore. Workshops are safer. Saws don't giggle. But when the rocks hum, I light smoke and hold my machete very, very close.
Our seventh story comes from Yaran Gurang, a Narinjeri woman who faced a nightmare in the Coorong region of South Australia in the summer of 2023. I'm a river daughter, born weaving nets and reading the tides in Garinjeri country, where the water's my kin and the wind carries whispers older than time. At 28, I was working as a wetland ecologist in Goolwa, buried in paperwork, council hearings, and watching developers circle our lagoons like hawks. The grind was endless, and I could feel the land pulling at my spirit, like it was telling me I needed to remember who I was. So I packed light, my swag, a fishing net, my reed knife, and a bundle of reed stalks, and took off for a solo camp along the Coorong's long, lonely shoreline. I wasn't going for data collection or field samples. I was going to breathe again. The Coorong's a sacred stretch, saltwater lagoons, whispering reed beds, rolling dunes that hide and reveal themselves like they've got moods. It's a place where pelicans wheel like guardians, where the moon paints the water in silver streaks, and where the silence hums with stories if you know how to listen. My Uncle Raymond used to tell me about the Muldjewangk, a monster of the deep, half man, half fish, all anger. Said it lived in the murk, dragging down anyone who disrespected the water, especially outsiders or locals who forgot the old ways. I thought it was one of those tales grown-ups told to stop kids swimming too far. I respected it, but I didn't believe it. Turns out, belief doesn't matter when you're trespassing in a place that remembers. I rolled in just before dusk, sky bruised with purple and copper, the wind tangling my hair as pelicans skimmed over the still water. The air was heavy with salt, dried fish, and the faint rot of old reeds, a scent that settles into your bones if you've lived here long enough. I picked a dune overlooking a narrow tidal channel, set my swag down, and lit a fire with some dry driftwood. The flames curled like red tongues, licking the night, and I grilled a fish I'd netted earlier, its skin crackling as the oil hit the coals. It felt right, peaceful. I leaned back and smiled to myself. "Yara, you're a bush queen," I muttered, half laughing. "No meeting notes here, just moonlight and fish guts." But sometime past midnight, the Coorong turned. It didn't just shift, it snarled. I woke to the sound of a surge, fast and violent, water tearing through my camp, soaking my swag, drowning the fire. The wave wasn't natural, it didn't build, it struck. The air smelled wrong, like seaweed left too long in the sun, and something else, something sharp and chemical, like bile. I sat bolt upright, knife in hand, heart pounding like a war drum. "Just a freak wave, yeah?" I whispered to the dark, but my voice didn't convince even me. I flicked on my torch and swept it toward the channel. That's when I saw it. The water wasn't calm anymore. It was churning, boiling almost, and in the beam of the torch I caught glints. Not reflections, scales, fins, movement that didn't belong. The lagoon shimmered unnaturally, oily under the moonlight, like something was swimming just under the surface, watching. That's when the voice came. Yara, it growled, bubbling from beneath, like gravel rolling inside a throat full of water. My skin prickled, my legs went numb, and my breath caught halfway up my chest. Something rose from the channel, first the silhouette, then detail. It was massive, maybe 8 feet tall, hunched, with a body like wet kelp woven around muscle. Its face was part human, part fish, with eyes that glowed like drowned lanterns, and gills that hissed open and shut. Seaweed hung like hair. Its tail lashed behind it, churning the water into fury. "Big on intros, fish face," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. My voice cracked anyway. The Muldjewangk surged forward, claws cutting through the reeds, tail smashing into the shore. I bolted up the dune, water chasing my ankles, the fire fully drowned. My swag, my net, gone, floating. I could feel the ground itself recoil beneath me. That thing wasn't just swimming, it was claiming.
Then I remembered Uncle Raymond's stories. He used to talk about reed charms, spiral weaved with prayer and intention. They weren't just for decoration, they were protection, offerings, shields, messages to spirits that said, "I'm here with respect." I'd packed some reeds, but I'd gotten lazy. No charm, no greeting. I'd taken fish without asking, and now something was coming to take me. I fumbled in my swag, grabbed the reeds and started weaving. My fingers shook, skin raw from salt, but I wove fast, tight, the spiral forming between my palms. I whispered the prayer in Garangeri, the one my Nana taught me, voice trembling. I tied it off with a strand of my hair and held it close. The Muldjewangk roared, no other word fits, and the wind screamed with it. The water rose again, pulling at the dune like it wanted to drag the whole land into the channel. The charm pulsed in my hand, warm and faintly glowing under the torchlight. I saw something, on the ridge to my right, a limestone outcrop, worn and cracked, but bearing the markings of my people. Carvings, waves, eels, fish, law lines, the old kind, sacred. I sprinted. The beast lunged, its webbed claws slicing the air behind me. I felt one graze my ankle, ice cold and slick like death's handshake, and I stumbled, crying out. But I didn't stop. I hacked through reeds with my knife, holding the charm high, the prayer now a full-throated chant. I reached the ridge and slammed my hand, charm and all, against the carvings. The response was instant. The stone warmed, lit from within like fire under skin. The water paused, just for a moment, and the Muldjewangk reeled back. Its eyes flared, but it didn't strike, not yet. The carvings pulsed with ancient rhythm, answering my chant with one of their own. I pressed my bleeding ankle to the stone, blood mingling with salt, and let the prayer pour from my mouth until I was screaming it. The lagoon raged. The water wasn't water anymore. It was eyes, mouths, fingers, all reaching, all watching. The Muldjewangk slithered around the base of the ridge, tail flicking foam, claws twitching. It circled, patient. It was waiting for my song to break, for my voice to crack, for the charm to fall. But I held fast, charm bound to the stone, hands numb from pressure, mouth bone dry from chanting. "Not your bait, mate," I growled, more to myself than to it. "Not tonight." The stars blurred, the sky shifted from black to gray, and finally, light crept across the Karoom. Dawn. The Muldjewangk let out one last rumble and melted back into the channel, its form unraveling into seaweed and foam. The water fell still, the tide normal, the lagoon glassy once more, as if nothing had happened. But something had.
I collapsed onto the sand, throat raw, ankle burning, hands raw from reed fibers. My charm lay on the carving, no longer glowing, but still warm. I packed what was left of my camp, what little there was, and hobbled out of there by midday. Every gust of wind a shiver down my spine. My net was shredded, my fire pit buried, even my footprints near the channel had been erased. Back in Gulwa, I didn't tell anyone right away. Who would believe me? But I made a decision that stuck. I started pushing harder against the developers. I got the wetlands protection expanded. I returned to teaching kids how to weave charms, to speak the old language by the river, to give thanks before casting a net. I fought like someone who'd seen the water's mouth and knew it could open again. I don't camp by the Kurung alone anymore. Labs are safer. Data doesn't glow in the dark or growl your name. But sometimes, when I hear the tide hum low and strange, I still weave reed spirals, and I never, ever forget to say hello before I fish, because the Muldjewangk doesn't forget.
Our 8th story comes from Murrumbidgee, a Tiwi man who faced a terror in the Tiwi Islands of Northern Territory during the wet season of 2024. I'm an islander to my core. Carving wood and dancing ceremony on Tiwi country is my soul's beat. At 33, I was an artist in Milikapiti, worn thin by gallery deadlines and tourists haggling over my sculptures like I was peddling souvenirs at a ferry dock. My spirit felt bent like a dry wanga stick. So I packed my swag, my carving knife, and a didgeridoo my grandfather left me, and went out bush, solo. I needed the island's breath again, the mangrove's stillness, the rhythm of tides instead of text messages. The Tiwi Islands, they're a whole other world. Dense mangrove forests laced with tidal creeks, paperbark groves soaked with dreaming, beaches where the moon makes the water dance. The kind of place where old spirits still walk with you if you walk with respect. My auntie, before I left, cupped my cheek and said, "Don't forget the Papinijuwari boy. One eye, walks with fire, eats your soul if you forget who you are." I laughed. "Come on, auntie, that's just for keeping kids near camp." But she didn't laugh back. It's not the kids who get eaten, it's the ones who forget. I should have listened better. I trekked in midday, sweating bullets under the wet season sun, mozzies clinging to my skin like tattoos. The air hung heavy, thick with salt, damp bark, and that loamy mangrove scent that says home. Pandanus leaves brushed my arms like elders checking in. The mud underfoot sucked at my boots like it wanted stories. I found a rise near a tidal creek, just high enough to keep the water off me, and set camp. The moment I started carving, I felt good again, grounded. My hands remembered how to glide over wood like water over stone. I started with a turtle, slow, steady, strong in dreaming. My knife whispered as it bit the timber, the scent of cypress and earth rising. "Waru, you're a legend," I muttered, half grinning. I played the didge a little, low and soft, not for show, just to say thanks to the land. But I didn't make an offering, didn't sing the right words, didn't ask permission. I'd forgotten Auntie's warning like it was just wind. I thought the island and I were on good terms. Turns out, even kin has rules. That night, the island turned feral. I woke to heat, not the kind from a fire I'd lit, but something red and raw slithering through the mangroves. A flickering glow, not steady. It moved, danced, licked the trees like they were wicks. At first I thought bushfire, lightning strike, but no crackle, no smoke, just this low, ugly hum, like a didge played wrong. I sat up, heart pounding,
and that's when I smelled it. Burnt flesh and wet rot, like something roasting alive in the mud. My guts turned. I grabbed my carving knife, slipped on my boots barefoot, and scanned the trees. That's when I heard it. Waru. Deep, gravelly, like fire chewing through bone and whispering your name between cracks. The glow pulsed brighter, threading through the mangroves like veins. I flicked on my torch, beam jerking like my hands. It caught movement, flames curling into shapes. One shape, tall, too tall. One glowing eye, brighter than any ember, staring right into me. My skin crawled. My voice came out in a croak. Okay, Waru, don't choke. Auntie's stories hit me like thunder. The Papinijuwari, a one-eyed giant, not just fire, soul fire, walking judgment with a torch in its hand. You carve without thanks, it burns your spirit. You stray from law, it comes with flame. And I'd carved without offering. No ochre on the wood, no songline sung. I'd just taken, rushed, disrespected the land that raised me.
The thing stepped through the trees, taller than a coconut palm, skin like cracked charcoal, that single eye blazing like molten gold. In its hand, a firebrand swung slow and deadly, painting the trees with shadows that danced wrong, twisted. It called again, Waru. Big fan of my work, eh, Torchy? I quipped, voice quivering like paper bark in wind. It wasn't bravery, it was habit. If I didn't joke, I'd scream. The firebrand came down like lightning, incinerating a pandanus beside me. I dove behind a mangrove trunk, bark splinters slicing my cheek, the heat scorching the hairs on my arms. My carving knife clutched like a lifeline. I saw my half-finished turtle on the log, and my mind screamed, effigy. Auntie had said, spirits hate being seen. Carve their likeness with respect, and they might back off. I snatched the turtle, carving knife slipping in my sweaty grip, and scratched fast, added an eye, a spiral, a flame shape, whispering an old Tiwi prayer between gasps. My voice shook, but it was better than silence. The air changed. The growl softened, but the heat ramped up. The Papinijuwari stepped closer, its firebrand sweeping, setting the creek's edge alight. The flames hissed up like snakes. My sweat turned to steam. I carved harder, scales, lines of power, my hands blistering. My breath came ragged, smoke scratching my lungs. The turtle effigy was nearly done, but the giant wasn't done with me. It swung its torch again. My swag exploded in flames. My didgeridoo blackened in seconds. I rolled, hot coals burning through my shirt. Lousy aim, One Eye, I rasped, hoisting the effigy like a shield. The air shimmered with heat. The mangroves glowed, branches curling into hands, faces watching from bark, flames licking up like gossip. Through the smoke, I saw salvation. A sandstone outcrop, sacred. Tiwi carvings gouged deep, eyes, hands, totems etched by elders long gone. The kind of place the old spirits still listened. I bolted. Feet tore through bracken, vines lashed my legs. Fire chased like it had a grudge. I hit the stone, dropped to my knees, and slammed the effigy into the carvings, chanting louder, words spilling out of my mouth like blood. The carvings glowed, faint at first, then strong. Light wove through the smoke like net string, forming lines around me. The Papinijuwari stepped back. Not much, but enough. Its eye narrowed, firebrand crackling in protest. It circled, a hunter pacing, waiting.
It knew the prayer would tire me before it tired. I stayed by the carvings, carving more, my hands shaking, raw. The turtle's back bled into the stone, and I felt something shift. The tide in the air, the spirit line pulsing through country. The flames stuttered, but the Papinijuwari didn't vanish. It waited, watched, testing. And I chanted. My voice cracked, my arms ached, my head rang with heat. The smoke pressed down like a wet blanket, my lungs working overtime. But I didn't stop, couldn't. If I gave it even a breath of silence, I knew it'd pounce. The giant stepped forward, once, twice, then froze. The light from the carving surged, weaving through the smoke like spears of daybreak. The eye of the Papinijuwari blinked, dimmed, then, finally, it turned. Not in rage, in resignation. Like it had tried, and the law had answered. It faded into the smoke, firebrand last to go. Just a flicker, then nothing. I collapsed, shaking, gasping. The dawn sky was pale gray. No birdsong, no insects, just stillness. I crawled from the stone, hands raw, skin scorched, ankle twisted from running. My camp? Gone. Swag melted, didgeridoo a black stick. Mangroves scarred with ash. The effigy was cracked, half charred, but still warm, still mine. I limped out, prayer still echoing in my chest, the carving's glow etched into my eyelids. Back in Milikapiti, I didn't just go back to galleries, I started teaching kids. Ceremony, song, respect. We carved effigies together, we sang thanks before touching wood. We remembered, because I'd been reminded, the Papinijuwari still walks. It doesn't always burn. Sometimes it just watches, waiting for us to forget again. I don't camp in the mangroves anymore. Studios are safer. Paint doesn't growl. But when the night flickers and I catch a smell like singed pandanus in a breeze that shouldn't carry smoke, I start carving again, quietly, carefully. And I never forget to say thank you. Our ninth story comes from Kale Burung, a Gunai/Kurnai man who faced a horror in East Gippsland, Victoria, in the autumn of 2023. I'm a forest wanderer. Tracking wombats and listening to the bush in Gunai country keeps me sane. At 30, I was a park ranger based out of Bairnsdale. I'd grown up under these gums and grey skies, raised on dreaming stories and river walks with my pop. But lately, ranger life felt more like damage control than land stewardship. Budget cuts meant fewer boots on the ground, and every week I was hauling beer cans and burnt plastic out of sacred sites. The land was hurting, and I was starting to feel like a bystander. So I packed my swag, a hand axe, and an old-school tinderbox, and set off for a solo hike to clear my head. My destination? A cave the old fellas had spoken of, tucked deep in the forested hills above the Mitchell River. They called it that place where stone breathes. Even growing up, no one would camp too close. Too many warnings, too many vanishings, brushed off as hikers lost to the wild. My grandfather had only ever told me one thing about it. If the Nargun calls your name, don't answer back. Don't give it your breath. Don't give it your shape. I used to think it was a boogeyman tale, something to keep kids from climbing cliffs and poking into dark places. Turns out, the rocks remember better than we do. East Gippsland is a patchwork of eucalyptus forests, rocky gullies, deep-cut rivers, and hills that whisper when you're quiet. The land doesn't just lie still here, it pulses. The trees watch, The earth listens. I trekked in at dawn, gum leaves crunching beneath my boots, lyrebirds mimicking me from the undergrowth like forest pranksters. Mist curled like fingers through the tree trunks, dampening my gear and lifting my spirits. The deeper I went, the more the static of my mind cleared. The land wasn't just beautiful, it was alert. By noon, I found the cave. It yawned from a granite bluff, half swallowed by ferns and creepers. The air shifted as I approached, cooler, thick with moisture, like the cave breathed. A hollow sound rolled from it, not an echo, not wind, a kind of waiting. I set camp in a small clearing about 30 meters from the entrance. The fire was tricky to light in the damp, but once it caught, it hissed and spat eucalyptus smoke like a welcome. I brewed tea in my billy, the scent grounding me. "Cale, you're a bush boss," I muttered, half laughing, sipping from a tin cup. The forest had gone still, but not in a dangerous way, more like it was listening, watching. That night, though, the hills growled. It started with a tremor, not a queak, but something deeper, a grind like stones scraping bones. My swag shivered, the ground pulsing beneath it. I sat bolt upright, heart thudding. The scent in the air shifted, from damp gumbark to wet stone, and something else, sharp, metallic, like blood left too long in the heat. I clutched my axe, every ranger instinct telling me to get up, to move, to run, but I stayed frozen. Then came the sound, low and slow, like the forest breathing through broken teeth. The stars overhead flickered, the firelight dimmed, even as the flames kept burning. Something had stepped into the world. The grinding deepened, the cave mouth, already black as pitch, seemed to stretch wider, deeper. My torch beam jittered in my hand as I swept it across the tree line. And that's when I saw them. Not shadows, not branches, limbs, stone limbs. They didn't move like human arms, too jagged, angular, wrong. One reached around the edge of the cave mouth and pulled. Not a creature emerging, but the cave itself rising, becoming. Stone scraped stone as the Nargun revealed itself. It wasn't a monster, not really. It was the cave, a living thing of granite and rage, its body squat and massive, its arms slabs of rock shaped by centuries of fury. Two molten eyes flickered within its broad face like furnace coals.
And it said my name, Cale. The sound made my teeth ache, like pressure building behind my eyes. It wasn't a voice, it was a memory, rumbling through the land, scraping through my blood. I dropped to one knee, my axe nearly fell from my hand. I managed to gasp out a sentence. "Big on roll call, Rockhead?" I meant it as a joke, but my voice wobbled like a snapped branch. The Nargun stepped forward, feet crushing saplings, moss flaking off its stony chest like dead skin. I ran. Branches clawed my face, roots tried to trip me. Behind me, the ground cracked and groaned with each of the Nargun's steps. The forest wasn't just watching, it was reacting, shifting, warning me. I remembered something Grandfather had said when I was 12. Nargun doesn't want your body, wants your shape, your shadow. That's how it knows you. Gunai Kurnai shadow rituals, dances by firelight, shadows cast long across sacred stone to tell stories, to show you belonged. I'd made no such offering. I skidded into the clearing, lungs heaving, and fumbled at my tinderbox. My fingers barely worked. Sparks flew, the fire caught. I fed it fast, gum leaves, dry bark, anything. The flame rose high. I stepped into its glow, casting my shadow long and tall onto the surrounding trees, and I danced. Not perfectly, not beautifully, but from memory, from fear, from heart. I moved with the land's rhythm, whispering a Gunai prayer my pop had taught me. Words I barely understood then, but they rang true now. The shadows flickered, and I saw them stretch toward a nearby rock face. I hadn't seen the carvings before, half buried under vines, but they were there. Spirit lines, tracks, ancestor eyes. I danced toward them, my shadow leaping across the stone. And as my form reached the carvings, the air changed. The Nargun paused. Its eyes narrowed, fire dimming slightly. Then it roared. It lunged, not like a predator, but like a crashing landslide. One fist, half the size of a ute, slammed down, grazing my shoulder. The force knocked me sideways, axe spinning into the dirt. My arm screamed in pain, but I scrambled back to the fire, tossing more fuel, the embers biting my skin. The carvings pulsed with warmth. The stone beneath my feet vibrated, not with threat, but with welcome. I pressed my shadow against them again, my prayer louder, sweat soaking through my shirt. The Nargun's arm slammed a gum tree to splinters, but didn't touch me. I realized then, it wasn't trying to kill me. It was testing me. Had I come as a thief, a tourist, or as a son of the land? I kept dancing. My body ached, my legs shook. The fire was dying, but I stoked it. My hands were blistered, fingertips raw. The night dragged on, thick with stone tension. The Nargun circled, never leaving the cave entirely, its molten eyes watching, weighing. At one point, the forest seemed to sing with me, wind carrying my prayer, trees rustling like applause. The carvings shone steady now, a heartbeat of light. My shadow held. The Nargun stepped back, just once, then again. Dawn cracked through the gums like a whip of gold. The Nargun turned, slowly, reluctantly. It slid back into the cave, the grinding quieting, the heat in the air lifting. The stone calmed. The forest breathed again. I collapsed. My shoulder throbbed, my throat was raw. My swag was half buried under churned-up dirt. One boot was gone. My axe lay blackened near the fire, the steel warped. I limped out of that forest, the carving's light still warming my spine like a blessing. Back in Bairnsdale, I didn't say much to anyone at first. Who'd believe me? But I started visiting schools, talking to kids,
teaching about our lands, our lore, the shadows we carry. I still work as a ranger, but I stay away from that cave. I've marked it silent on all the maps. Sometimes the earth hums underfoot when I hike alone, and when it does, I light a fire. I cast my shadow long. I dance, not for show, not for fear, but because I remember. And I never answer back when I hear my name in the dark.
Our 10th story comes from Leary Yaren, a Watchabaluk woman who faced a terror in the Wimmera region of Victoria in the spring of 2024. I'm a daughter of the plains. Hunting emus and gathering bush tucker in Watchabaluk country is my life's song. At 26, I was a teacher's aide in Horsham, worn thin by classroom chaos, funding cuts, and drought reports that cracked my heart like dry clay. Every day I watch the land shrivel, kids too young to understand the sorrow and dust. So when school holidays hit, I packed my swag, a pair of clapping sticks and a water gourd for a solo camp along the Wimmera River, hoping to quiet my head and reconnect with the spirit of the land. The Wimmera is a stretch of mallee scrub, red earth, and ghost gums. Quiet country, but alive if you listen right. The water runs slow, like an old story. My grandmother used to tell me tales under the stars, and the one that always stuck was about Tiddalik, the greedy frog who drank up all the world's water. I thought it was a Dreamtime lesson about sharing. Turns out, the Earth's got a thirst deeper than anything we know, and sometimes it remembers. I hiked in just before sunrise. The air was cool but dry, and wattle blooms dusted the breeze with yellow. Magpies warbled from the trees, their songs echoing across the plains like old women gossiping. The river was low, so low the banks were cracked and curled like burnt bark, but it was still beautiful, the kind of quiet that speaks. I found a rise above a billabong and set up camp there. The water was shallow, but still, reflecting the sky like a glass plate. I lit a small fire, warmed a damp ride packed, and let the bush settle over me. "Lyra, you're a bush queen," I chuckled to myself, sipping from my gourd. The malley's hush wrapped around me like a lullaby. That night, though, the Wimmera groaned. I woke to a shudder in the ground. Not wind, not a roo in the brush. A deep, sucking sound, like the earth was gulping something down. The air turned foul, baked clay and something older, sour like mildew and breath that'd been trapped too long. My throat caught. I sat up fast, grabbing my clapping sticks, pulse hammered. "Just the river settling, yeah?" I muttered, trying to convince myself. But when I looked over the rise, I saw the billabong shrinking. The water was draining, slurping downward into the dirt like someone had pulled the plug. That's when I heard it. A croak. Deep, guttural. It didn't echo. It rolled through me, thick and wet. I flicked on my torch, the beam jerking over the dark. The billabong's surface was bulging, rippling like dough rising in a bowl, then splitting open. Something was pushing up through the mud. I froze. My skin prickled and my hands gripped the clapping sticks tight. "Okay, Lyra, don't be a numpty," I muttered, trying to shake the fear. But my grandmother's stories came rushing back. Tiddalik wasn't just a greedy frog. He was punishment, a lesson for those who took without respect. I'd sipped from the river without a proper offering. No prayer, no clap, no thanks. A city mistake in sacred country. The shape rose from the mud, massive, toad-like, with eyes like muddy moons. Its belly swelled and pulsed, skin shining like wet clay under the torchlight. And then it croaked my name. "Lyra," it said. Not yelled, not screamed, just stated it like a fact. The sound cracked the ground beneath me, and my legs turned to jelly. "Big on name-dropping, Froggy," I managed, my voice cracking. Tiddalik squatted there, blocking the stars, its weight splitting the earth like a dropped axe. I backed up, nearly tripping on a root. The billabong was empty now, water gone, and in its place, mud that stank of rot and bones. I turned and bolted, breath ragged, dry branches lashing my arms as I ducked through mallee scrub. I remembered something my grandmother told me. Watchable-look clap-and-stick rituals, passed down through women, were once used to speak to the land. Rhythmic prayers, shaped like stories, could soothe the spirit or call it off. I'd been careless. So I stopped in a clearing, heart hammering, and raised the sticks. The first beat was shaky, then another. I started slow, clap, pause, clap, pause. I whispered the old water-sharing prayer, the words rough from disuse, slipping through dry lips. The air thickened, and the croak dimmed a little, but Tiddalik moved. Its tongue lashed out, slick and fast, and sliced a young gum tree clean in half. I didn't stop. I couldn't. The beat steadied, matching my pulse. Clap, clap, clap. Dust rose in clouds around my feet.
The cracks in the earth widened, glowing faintly under the moonlight. Shapes began to emerge, circles, spirals, law lines, like patterns pressed into the clay by old hands. I turned, spotting a clay bank not far off, its face etched with watchable-look carvings, rivers, frogs, spirits. I sprinted towards it, beating the sticks as I ran. Tiddalik let out a sound, a thunderous croak that made my teeth rattle, but I didn't stop. The carving seemed to hum under the torchlight, warm like sun on skin. I pressed my sticks to the bank and kept beating. My prayer got louder, my voice fierce, even though my arms burned. The mallee trees swayed without wind, their limbs bending towards me like they were listening. The billabong stirred. The mud trembled. A trickle of water seeped back into the basin. Tiddalik croaked again, softer this time, uncertain. Its belly sagged, no longer bloated. Its tongue snapped again, raising a cloud of grit. But its strikes were slower, weaker. I kept my rhythm strong, feeding it with pain, prayer, and sweat. My body screamed, but I danced like I'd never danced before. Danced like my grandmother was watching, like the plains depended on it. Hours passed. The carvings pulsed with light. The earth's tremor dulled. The cracks around me settled like old wounds stitching shut. And then, just as dawn split the horizon pink and gold, Tiddalik groaned. It backed into the billabong, slow, resentful. The water returned behind it, creeping in waves, washing over the cracked mud like a gift or a warning. Its eyes lingered on mine one last time before it sank below the surface. Gone, but not forgotten. I collapsed beside the carvings, hands bleeding, body ruined. The prayer was still lingering on my tongue. I hiked out in silence. My camp was a mess, mallee limbs broken, damper buried, gourd shattered, but the river was full again. Back in Horsham, I returned to the classroom. Kids don't croak, but I made a new lesson plan, one that taught them about Tiddalik, about respect, about water, and what happens when we take without asking. I lead trips now, out to watchable-look country, guiding students to sit with the land, to listen to the whispers in the reeds. I don't camp by the Wimmera, not alone. The river sleeps, but I don't trust its silence. When the ground cracks, I clap my sticks. When the wind shifts, I whisper my grandmother's prayer. Because the land remembers, and so does Tiddalik.